But back to our topic this morning, we shall be discussing a lot of issues with the panelists, where Seth Olale just read a story on the new development on the Kenya and Somalia diplomatic row. Yesterday also we had this particular editorial cartoon from Victor. It's all about what is happening right now, setting the record straight. Migingo still is a ticklish issue, but let's just come to this particular issue of Somalia and Kenya right now. This has been fixated on the media for the past 1 week, and we have new revelations as far as the Seth is concerned, with New Farm now saying, some of those marked territories belong to Somalia as well. I don't know where we are at. This is a diplomatic issue, and I need to pick your brains also, Ambassador Erastus Mwencha, and the rest of us, as far as this is concerned. I know this is a story you've been following. What are your concerns, and what is your input on this as well?
I think I like to approach this matter from two aspects. First, one of the principles that govern borders, and the second one is this incident and how it has played out. Now, starting with the principles, one of the things that the OAU did when it was established way back in 1963 was to say that for Africa to avoid a situation that we are going to go into war, like Europe did and others, let us accept that the boundaries that were inherited from the colonial powers will be respected. So that's the first principle. Then there is a second aspect which talks about principles of border dispute. Now, how do you arrive at amicable solutions when there is a dispute, particularly where there is no clear demarcation? And there are many instances like this Migingo where people are saying this is where the beacon is and so forth. There are three principles here that are normally employed. One is what you may call then the trajectory process. That's what is in dispute here. Somalia saying, follow the trajectory of the border as it comes from the land, then you extend it to the sea. But there is also a principle of latitudinal, but that is more or less like an understanding. This is a global principle. There is also a third one which talks of equidistance. You look at the issue and then you say half. I say all this because in Africa, there are many border disputes, and many of them have been solved amicably. But where there is a lack of understanding, then you go to International Court of Justice. I mean, you have a border issue. You know what has happened between Ethiopia and Eritrea. There is Senegal, Gambia. There is, Nigeria, Cameroon. So many of them, and Kenya has had its own share. Now let's come to the history of it. This is not the first time Kenya is facing this challenge with Somalia.
Yes.
Don't forget that in the 60s, Somalia had that policy of Greater Somalia and wanted to claim all territories that, were in Kenya, in Ethiopia, and Kenya literally went into war. Not literally, went into war. And that war was solved within the context of the OAU. Now, where are we today here? To me, it looks like there's been a practice, there's been an agreement, and this practice, which has been on for 40 years, there seems to have been an understanding. When this map was presented in Europe, which clearly showed that it was departing from that practice, to me, then the question is, how do you engage each other? I'm not sure that all the processes, particularly the initial processes, were well exhausted. Before you go public and raise public sentiments, I think it would have been, in my view, first of all, summon the ambassador from Mogadishu, then send the ambassador with a protest note to talk to the government. At the same time, summon the Somali ambassador here. But it looks to me that the next step that we went is to expel the ambassadors, if that's what is in the media is right. Now that escalates tension. But fortunately, I think Somalia said, well, there was nothing like an auction. There's nothing like, but the map, that clearly shows that that's the map they presented. The case is before the court. Somalia would have been foolhardy to go ahead and use this when the case is in the court. And I think that's why Somalia has taken this back step to say no, because it knows that that would be in violation. Kenya was reluctant to go to court, but I think given the circumstances and given what, in fact, even the former Attorney General did say before, that yes, Kenya was going to go to court. I think now that the matter is before court, we should encourage the two nations to go there, because as neighbors, a border is highly emotive. It can bring a lot of problems. In fact, in the African Union, there is a border program that monitors borders. Once you see that, you try to help countries reach amicable solution.
All right. Let's hear from Ilungi Huto on this.
So I guess, you know, my nieces and nephews would probably say that we had a small tiff between Somalia and Kenya over the last 5 days. I think that's the way it's put. I mean, I think the issue is obviously quite important for the country. Oil and gas is, you know, has been embedded in Kenya's strategy for several years now in terms of economic growth. I think Ambassador Mwencha is really spot on when he talks about what are the maritime delineation principles that we're using and why haven't we resolved them. And perhaps did we move very quickly to essentially declare a break in diplomatic relations for this last weekend. Tomorrow, the Cabinet Secretary will be before the Defense Committee, the Defense and Foreign Relations Committee, to explain the current situation. One would just hope that, and I think I saw last night, that the tiff may be over, that there's some backdoor diplomacy that has begun. And therefore, the threat, I think, that was there on Saturday night, which was slightly veiled in the statement by the PS for Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Macharia, which was that it might affect a whole range of things. I mean, it might affect, for example, our military support for the Somalia government. It might affect the Dadaab camp. In fact, there was some talk about a 6-month deadline has already been issued to close Dadaab. I don't know how true that is. But the costs were very high. And I think my major concern was that Somali refugees would not be used as hostages in this oil and gas negotiation that is happening between the two governments. And furthermore, also that we don't destroy or harm what has essentially been good relationships between the Somali people and Kenyan people. Somebody posted a very interesting piece back in the 1960s, which really showed how much support Somalia gave the Kenyan nationalists before we became independent. And we have short memory spans, but actually if we go back 60, 70 years, it was at one point the Somalis that were helping our nationalists to fight against the British. And I think we shouldn't forget that long history that's there between the two countries.
Right, Dr. Njoki.
I think first we need to also appreciate the context, which it was sad also maybe the reactions, the threats probably were not well thought about. But if you look at the context first of dwindling oil reserves around the world, this is not unique to Kenya. Globally, there are probably about 8 global flashpoints where we have contested territory claims, and especially now with oil and gas reserves from South China Sea, the Falkland Islands, the Arctic Ocean. That's contested territory again between Canada, Russia, and Denmark in the Arctic Ocean, East China Sea, the Gulf of Thailand, Caribbean Sea, again between Nicaragua, Colombia, and Costa Rica, again with similar, what is actually, it's very similar to what's happening in Kenya, like for instance in the Caribbean Sea, where Nicaragua has granted oil licenses to prospective miners. And then of course Timor-Leste and Australia, the Caspian Sea has been of course a global flashpoint again around contested territory claims. But the oil and gas reserves bring in more, of course, bring in the contestation. So I think this is not unique to Kenya, but of course I'm not saying that we should not be putting the effort and the importance, that this is a very important thing that needs to be resolved. But this is an issue that happens around the world because of contested borders and also, of course, dwindling oil reserves. So it's a global issue, and I think we should be more measured and look to the International Court of Justice to deal with these issues.
Right. When we circle back, we'll hear from Dr. Moses Tofa on that as well, and Professor Norma Damba on the Kenya and Somali diplomatic row as far as the borderlines are concerned. That is a maritime borderline, and this story is with the International Court of Justice. So we'll see you on the other side of the break. of course, I appreciate your comments on our hashtag, which is AMLiveNTV. AMLiveNTV is a profile name on Facebook, and 20686 is our SMS portal. Use the hashtag AMLiveNTV. Thank you. Welcome back. You're watching Standing on Guard, where we're keeping an eye on the enemy, and the eye is on the maritime border and the row that is continuing between Kenya and Somalia. We promise to circle back with Norma and Dr. Moses Toffa to hear what they have to say about this particular new development so far, as the Norwegian firm has confirmed that yes, they made a business or had a business transaction with Somalia, and some of those deposits were within the Somalian borders. Let's just hear from Moses Toffa.
Yeah, I think
you will gloss over it. Let's hear from Professor Norma Damba.
My team here have enumerated a number of issues, but let me divert a little bit. The implication is serious for both countries. We see that we have been sending about 20 planes of Mira loaded every day. It's down to 3. Somalians are buying more kites from Ethiopia than Mira from Kenya. Jubilant has imposed heavy tax on us. Kenya hosts the largest refugees, as we know. Potential affecting thousands of Somalia in Kenya is very serious. We have to coexist. We have to live together. But here's my point. My point is the first time we went to Somalia was to serve the best national interest of Kenya. And that should be the primary goal and continue to be. So there are several things that need to happen. One, we must use all diplomatic efforts to calm down the situation and solve it. But we also need to have a contingency plan. Yes, if aid does not work, then we must be able to have a very clear plan on where we go. Number one, we need to draw the line on the sand that says this is a contested zone, and unless there is amicable understanding on the way forward, or the court come down one way or another, there should not be any exploration at all by any entity on this zone. And the same thing needs to happen to Migingo. And then we need to perhaps use very effective backdoor diplomacy, or appoint a special diplomatic person to deal with issues, because the implication for both countries in the long term is very serious.
Right. Okay.
Just one word.
Ambassador.
I hate to say this, but first of all, I'm coming from a theory that we must be careful not to be lured into war by those who are perhaps who don't have good intentions for us. And this is the point I'm trying to make. This oil has been known to exist here for us many decades, but no one wanted to exploit it. They just left it there. Now they see that we are ready to start embarking on that. They want us to get into war with Somalia so that we don't even exploit it, and we'll be impoverished because we'll divert all our attention so that we start fighting. So we must resist those efforts out there that are, because anybody who was auctioning this, and particularly these Western firms which were coming to buy, what due diligence did they do to see that this is not a contested land? I mean, when you are going to buy a house, the first thing you do is due diligence to see that this is a property that does no encumbrances. And anybody trying to do it is stoking fire. And we shouldn't be lured into this. We must resist, go through along the lines that my colleagues have articulated.
Okay. And this is a developing story. Of course, we shall be having more revelations and news on it, and we should put tails on that and discuss also that much later in the course of the day, or even next week here on Standing on Guard. But I see also reactions on Twitter. We have that Bing Charlie saying the thief is unfortunate, uncalled for, and will have untold consequences if diplomatic channels are not adequately and exhaustively stated. Also, we have Opakasi Jackson saying that, exactly, Erastus, we have Kenyans who cannot even afford 20 shillings to buy a receipt, and health wants such people to NHIF. The CS must reflect on that. This is commenting on earlier what we were discussing as far as healthcare is concerned and the story of Morage. Also, we do have Daktari Paul M. Ksafi saying, I'm Paul from Nairobi. I think some statements are just taken for pleasure since they are not reality. My dear CS, just define what free means first. And we have also Kimani Mali saying that the Beyond Zero campaign is a noble idea, but the First Lady is in a better position to help the President fight corruption, especially in the Ministry of Health. I believe her heart is in the right place, but corruption will kill it. This is what we have from Kimani Mali as well. So let's hear what you have to say as far as some of the stories we've done this morning and discuss are concerned as well.